One thing the ancient Romans were famous for was the wild parties in which they indulged heavily in food and wine, but also in the pleasures of the flesh. A commodity at these parties was gladiators. Today we'll be exploring how these ancient warriors showcase their worth both inside and outside of the arena. Gladiators were like the superstars of their time. To some they were the equivalent of a modern-day rock star, but people also looked down on them in some ways. While a lot of gladiators were free men who joined the school of gladiators or ludus to pay off some debts, gladiators were usually slaves. Nonetheless, they represented important values of bravery, strength, or virility that Romans did admire. Even though gladiators were considerably low in the food chain of society, women in Rome were still incredibly attracted to them. Some women even believed that their sweat was a love potion, and that a single drop of gladiator's blood was enough to make a man hard for days. But all of this attention could really complicate things for these warriors. Now, when it comes to sexuality from that time, we do have ample evidence from things like ancient artistic depictions and writings of the time showing exactly what this aspect of life was for both the gladiators and the people who were interested in them outside of the arena. Here's where things get muddy and complicated. Even though gladiators were popular and admired, they were seen as being on the same social level as people who were in the adult entertainment business in Roman society, to put it that way. In truth, gladiators, despite being rockstar athletes of their time, didn't have much status or respect. Gladiators as bedroom partners were a little bit of an underground commodity. Since they were seen as brave and gained fame for their victories in the arena, they were desired by both women and men alike. But at the same time, polite Roman society kept them at arm's length. That being said, that didn't stop many people from the ancient Roman elite from discreetly enjoying their skills outside of the arena. Such discretion was necessary, because even though people admired gladiators for being willing to risk their lives, at the end of the day, many Romans still thought of them as little more than slaves whose only purpose was to entertain. Still, gladiator essence, if you will, was still thought of as a delicacy in ancient Rome. Gladiator sweat and blood were sold in Roman society because people believed that they had special powers. While their sweat was used in perfumes and beauty treatments, their blood was thought to be a potent aphrodisiac. On her wedding night, a young Roman bride might have her hair parted with a sword dipped in the blood of a dead gladiator, believing it would bring her a long and happy marriage. Roman graffiti gives us a glimpse into how people idolized gladiators. An example of an ancient graffiti found in the barracks of the Julian-Claudian gladiator says, "Celadus the Thracian is the delight of all the girls." And another, "Celadus the Thracian makes girls moan." Whether these were written by fans or by Celadus himself trying to build his own reputation is not really clear. Hot encounters between the high Roman society and gladiators taint the name of even famous emperors. According to two Roman historians, Herodian and Dio Cassius, Faustina the Younger, the wife of Emperor Marcus Aurelius, became so obsessed with the gladiator she saw during a parade that she fell sick. She confessed her feelings to her husband, and after consulting fortune tellers, he was told that the gladiator should be killed while Faustina lay under him, covered in his blood, to be cured of her passion. It seems that the gladiator was supposed to be with Faustina when he died, and right after, she was to have relations with her husband. Whether this story is true or not, it doesn't matter. It just shows how much people believed in the special powers of gladiator blood and the strong sexual energy they represented. Their son, Commodus, who later became emperor, might have even had gladiator blood. Interestingly, he became a would-be gladiator himself. He loved fighting in the arena more than being an emperor, although he often battled disabled people and gladiators with blunt weapons. Another popular use for gladiators for both Roman men and women were as bodyguards. This made sense because having a skilled fighter to protect you was useful, and for retired gladiators, it was a way to make money after their arena days. It would guard wealthy Romans while they traveled or help keep soldiers in line. However, many wealthy women hired gladiators for a different reason. And by now, you already know what that reason is. Some people hired gladiator bodyguards with the hope of getting very close to them in a different way. But what about female gladiators? And yes, there were in fact female gladiators at one point. Female gladiators, or gladiatrices, were much less common than their male counterparts and were banned in 200 BC. However, when they did enter the arena, they were highly sexualized. Unlike male gladiators who wore some form of armor, female gladiators wore very little armor and were not even given helmets, likely to show off their faces and hairstyles. These female gladiator fights were seen as the height of luxury and were often showcased at private parties hosted by the Roman elite. Archaeological evidence suggests that female gladiators used the same weapons as men, that is, the traditional Roman gladius. One statue found depicts a female gladiator showing a bare-chested woman holding a sika. This is a short carved sword commonly used by a type of gladiator known as strikes. The similarity between them is that gladiators, both male and female, could also be hired as escorts. In many ways, they lost control over their bodies, whether as slaves or as free people who chose to fight. Despite this, the chance for sexual relations wasn't always seen as a negative. Gladiators were expected to take advantage of any opportunities for pleasure, and some may have viewed it as a job perk. Gladiator combat was rooted in both violence and also a sense of erotic beauty. There were so many different types of gladiators based on the weapons and tactics they used, but the most attractive gladiators were often the most respected. When selecting opponents for a fight, beauty was considered important. If a gladiator was unattractive, it could ruin the fascination with their deadly skills. The Roman poet Juvenal even mocked how much attention gladiators got from women in his satirical works. In his work Satire 6, he harshly criticized women, accusing them of lacking morals and virtue. His work, often seen as a misogynistic rant, was written to discourage his friend from getting married. One of the stories he included was about Epia, the wife of a Roman senator who left her husband for a gladiator. Juvenal mocked the situation, asking what youthful charms captivated Epia. What did she see in him to make herself a chic gladiator? He described Sergius, the gladiator, as being far from perfect. He had a wounded arm, facial scars from wearing a helmet, and a large scar on his nose, and a constant discharge from his eye. Despite all this, Epia still chose him over her family, her home, and her husband. Juvenal pointed out that it was the fact that Sergius was a gladiator that made him so desirable to Epia. She and Sergius eventually ran off to Egypt together. While this story of a woman giving up her wealth for the man she loved could be seen as romantic, Juvenal used it as an example of what he saw as the terrible behavior of the women of the time. Gladiatorial combat stirred up strong emotions among Roman spectators, and during the imperial period, noblewomen became more interested in getting close to gladiators. According to the poet Ovid, the best place to meet Roman women was at the gladiatorial games, as there was always an abundance of women in the arena to watch the gladiators fight. In Ars Amatoria, translated to The Art of Loving, he described the romantic atmosphere at the games, saying, "The circus aids new love, and the scattered sand of the gladiators' ring often brings Cupid arrows. Those watching the wounds sometimes get wounded themselves." Ovid painted a picture of spectators holding hands, chatting, and betting on which gladiator would win, only to find themselves emotionally caught up in the drama of the combat. Of course, different types of gladiators had their own unique appeal to them. For instance, the type of gladiator called retiarius was considered somewhat effeminate compared to others. The retiarius fought with minimal armor, armed only with a trident, a net, and a dagger. Wearing just a loincloth and a belt, he was considered one of the lower classes of gladiators, as he was seen as less honorable or powerful than other classes like the murmillo or the hoplomachus. His appearance and fighting style also had associations with homosexuality and femininity in the eyes of Roman society. In Satire 2 and Satire 8, Juvenal mocked a man named Gracchus for disgracing himself by becoming the bride of a horn player in a same-sex relationship, but also humiliated himself further by choosing to fight as a retiarius, as it was one of the least respected types of gladiators. Gracchus performed so poorly in the arena that he missed his throw, and had to run for his life. Gracchus' opponent, a well-armed secutor, who fought with a shield, sword, and armor specifically designed to defend against the retiarius, was embarrassed to fight him. So it's pretty clear that while gladiators were all the rage in ancient Rome and were considered the star athletes of the time, they also had it pretty rough outside of the arena, being treated as mere objects for the pleasure of the Roman citizens. I'm sure a lot of them saw this as a perk though. And what do you think? Would you see it as a job perk, or would it weigh even more upon your already enslaved existence? Let me know down in the comments. Thank you so much for joining me for today's tale. If you had fun or learned anything, do me a favor, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, drop a comment below, like the video, or share it with someone else. It's a small button for you and a gigantic leap for my channel. Until the next tale, farewell, and may the gods smile upon you.